Midi have stormed their way through into the music world by putting out some of the most exciting and invigorating rock music of the past few years, while also pairing it with some of the most electrifying and enthralling and most bizarre live performances I think many people have witnessed over the past few years. They're certainly at the front and centre of the experimental rock music scene that is currently bustling at the moment in the UK. You're getting bands that are combining, aspects of jazz, post-punk, experimental rock, that is calling back to the late 70s, early 80s, while having this modern twist. And all of these bands are honestly of a very high quality at the moment. The music they're putting out is pretty damn good. I don't need to list out all the names, you know which ones I'm talking about. And at this point, they're probably getting compared to each other a little bit too much, especially when we look at the new Black Midi album, which is honestly nothing like some of the other bands that are considered their contemporaries at the moment. And it's important to note, just for reference, for anyone that's never watched a video of mine before or whatever, that Schlagenheim was a grower for me. I liked it to begin with. I think I appreciated some songs more than I actively loved them. But then as time went on, that album really grew the hell out of me. The hell on me? Grew the hell on me, I think we'll go with. It truly is one of the most exciting rock albums of the past few years, in my opinion. And the live performances that they delivered on the Mercury Prize Award show really twisted my opinion on them completely, and I realized that actually they were something special, something insane, but also something special. And so Cavalcade is here now, hotly anticipated by me and many others, and I think it's going to be extremely well received. And it's well received from me, but I'm not entirely sure I'm quite there with it at the moment. I think it is pretty good overall, but I don't know if I'm quite as taken aback by what they're doing this time around on Cavalcade in comparison to Schlagenheim. Could that change? I mean, obviously, yeah, history has shown that their debut album did change for me in the end. It ended up being much better than I originally thought. So of course, this could be the same with Cavalcade here. I don't know, but I do think what they're doing is admirable, of course. I think the opening track, John L, is classic for what Black Midi usually do. I think it's a good opening track. It doesn't feel quite as intense as I think I want it to be. I don't know what it is. Maybe the mood that I'm in whenever I put this album on just isn't quite the right mood for an album like this. But I think there is something slightly off about some of these tracks that just isn't gut punching me or completely consuming me, which is what Schlagenheim ended up doing. I mean, we are getting the usual frantic guitar style, the frantic drumming, you've got the really off-kilter melody that is there. Of course, the melody is there, but it's completely, squashed by the extreme, instrumentation that's completely smothering it, which isn't a bad thing, obviously. It's just very classic for what this band is able to achieve with their instrumentation. The vocals this time around actually sound a bit more claustrophobic, and they're sort of impeded by something. It's almost like they're completely squashed and everything else is just bolstered up around it. He does take a really interesting vocal approach on a lot of these tracks, actually. I do appreciate the complete change in what he's doing with his voice. There was this kind of sarcastic, sardonic nature to his approach on the debut album, and yet this time around he's sounding way older or wiser. He sounds like an old man telling stories at points, which is an interesting juxtaposition with the instrumentals, because obviously they're very hyperactive and absolutely mental at points, and of course his voice just seems to be just sort of a voice of an old man just kind of shouting in a crowd, but his voice isn't quite loud enough, so everything just consumes it and he just gets left behind. On Chondro Malasia Patella, the madness completely consumes him this time around. It's incredibly manic and wild, and his voice is just sounding stranger than it ever has before. It just feels like the instrumental again is building and completely just going in a bizarre, strange direction, and you know, he just feels like he can't cope anymore and everything is just about to collapse on top of him. And I will say the predictability with this is noticeable. Quite a few tracks give off this sensation and do a similar thing where the instrumental builds and it goes a bit all crazy and manic, and of course once again this anxiety induced feeling that the instrumental gives you is created again and again, and it kind of just feels like a lot of the tracks just stick to that similar formula. Slow is a really good track in terms of how it sounds, but once again, of course, once you hit the ending, it does that similar build again, and you know, the horns syncopate with the drums. It reminds me of some of the builds on tracks from Black Country New Roads album, where they did a similar thing where the kind of like jazzy instrumentation just gets swallowed up with everything, and the mix is just a complete like tornado of sounds. And it sounds good, obviously, it's just maybe perhaps, you know, an idea that's repeated a few too many times. I said this with the Squid album as well. There were a few tracks that just did a similar thing, and then by the time you got to the end, you were like, well, this track has already done that, and that track did that too. It's a shame though, because when they do try going for something a little bit different, like on the track Diamond Stuff, the impact is just very low, like especially with the vocals. I can't really attach myself to the way he sounds here. You can't really make out a lot of what he's saying, and the track tries to progress and the results just aren't really that interesting. It's a huge shame, because I don't think it's, you know, very good that the one track that did go in a different direction has ended up being like this. Hogwash and Boulder Dash though is once again an intense track, but this time it gives off a very haunting sensation. It reminds me of the kind of feeling that you'd get from a Daughters song. Not that the song sounds like a Daughters song, don't misinterpret what I'm saying there. They don't sound like each other. Daughters are a different band, obviously, but the feeling that you get when you listen to a Daughters song is similar to the feeling you get listening to this song. Wouldn't mind it so much if it tried going at it from a different angle, providing a different kind of instrumental to, you know, tracks like Slow. I wouldn't really say there's a huge amount of variation with how they sound, but you know, it's still pretty good. Final track, Ascending Forth, seems to once again take the album in quite a new direction. This time around, you know, you've got quite a chunk of the song that's just the vocals and the guitar, which is an interesting approach. Really feels quite large and dramatic in its scope, I think, here. There's something quite like storyteller-ish with the way he's presenting this. Reminds me a lot of like late Leonard Cohen and late David Bowie with the way that they provide their vocals on the tracks that they did towards the end of their careers, which is obviously a compliment to, you know, throw out there for an artist like this. You know, Leonard Cohen, David Bowie, anyone would want those kind of comparisons. Really interesting and unique way to tell a story too. It's quite an abstract approach to it. Of course, you know, the lyrics talking about this man called Mark, really detailed and vivid imagery comes from this writing, and I think they do a great job of this track, actually. It's a really cool way to end the album, because it didn't really feel as predictable as some of the other ones. And that's the thing, like, it's a shame that I keep saying that, but there are moments that did feel quite predictable, and I don't really know what they could have done differently to make it not feel that way, but I'm not sure. It's still a good album overall. The talent is still just completely, you know, to die for. Like, the members of this band are so good at what they do. But I don't know if it's just going to be one of those albums that takes time to grow or takes time to settle in. But there wasn't anything that really wowed me, honestly. Like, there were some really good moments, some really good tracks, but I just wasn't really left thinking, oh, wow. And I don't know why I wasn't left thinking that. Who knows though, later down the line I could be like, oh, actually it's one of my favourite albums of the year, which is what we had with the debut album. Who knows? I can't really predict that. But at this point, I do think it's a pretty good album. I'm going to go 6.5 out of 10. I still think what they're doing at the moment is incredibly impressive, and I still think a lot of people are going to love this, and that's absolutely fine. But for me, I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. I think it gave me what I expected, and perhaps I wanted to be shocked in places that I wasn't shocked. Perhaps that's the issue here. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. I would love to see what you guys think of this. Do have a good day. If you haven't already, do have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already as well. Goodbye. Goodbye.